listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Elmo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch.
Captain.
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 Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain, Captain.
Captain.
No, not yet. Not yet. Don't pass out on me yet.
Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I'm still broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled over the K, but no longer from downtown Sacramento. In the original SHR Media Studios. Instead, my voice emanates from the South Sacramento area, but only for a short time, pending my final move to a free state. Be forewarned, what you're about to hear for the next 2 hours or so consists of my opinion and no one else's. I want to remind everybody that the Saloon is still serving stiff drinks, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense. And you got to remember, we don't water our drinks, just as we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, race, sex, economics, science, law. We talk about it right here at the Saloon, where the speech is free, but the booze is not. These are the final days of 2021, and I am done with bipartisanship or compromise. This is the new age of modern political warfare, gaslighting, lies, massive hypocrisy, half-truths, threats, and all on the part of Democrats, leftists, anarchists, aided and abetted by their propaganda organs, the American media maggots. They have all declared, we are on an open war footing against you. 2021 has been the year of retribution, revenge, and punishment of conservatives by Democrats, so let there be no mistake. I love my country, but abjure its leftist leaders and anybody who won't put America and her lawful citizens first. Obey the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, uphold the rule of law, and embrace due process. Democrats, leftists, and the American media maggots say that makes me a white supremacist. You know what? If loving my country makes me an extremist, then so be it. Now, tonight in the Saloon, we have returning guest GEORGE ELISEO. But before we go there, this is a department we haven't referred to in some time.
The Bloviating Zeppelins, HeyJackass.com Chicago Death Toll Update. Courtesy of Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
And yes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is from HeyJackass.com. HeyJackass.com, illustrating Chicago values, November to date. Shot and killed 38, shot and wounded 139, total shot 177, total homicides 40. Week in progress, that's November 14th to November 20th. Shot and killed 7, shot and wounded 29, total shot 36, total homicide 7. Year to date, shot and killed 719, shot and wounded 3,385. Total shot 4,104 in the good city of Chicago. Total homicide 764. Remember that in Chicago, the 2021 Chicago shot clock says a person is shot every 1 minute and 53 seconds in the great city of Chicago, managed by lovely Mayor Lori Lightfoot. And a reminder that a person is murdered every 10 minutes and 6 seconds in, again, the lovely, lovely city of Chicago. What leadership, what strong leadership continuously shown by the Democrats. Okay, that's enough. Anyway, for tonight, I have a returning guest. He is coming from the Southern California area. He is a retired law enforcement officer, and I have spoken with him. Well, first, before I go into some stuff, George Eliseo, how you doing, sir? Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
I go to your Twitter feed all the time, and apparently you go to my Twitter feed all the time, and we look at stuff back and forth. One thing I've noticed very seriously, let's see, when did I last speak to you? I spoke to you in August of the 27th of August. That's right, of 2019. And since 2019, August specifically, sadly, not much has changed.
No. Are you talking about, well, what do you mean specifically?
Oh, well, I don't know. Everything like the world. So let's see if I get this right. You are an 11-year veteran of the San Diego Police Department. You retired. What year did you retire, George?
2000.
Okay, so you are also the author of the Kindle book Altering Course. That was released back in October of 2013. Right. And I think I have it on Kindle, but I think it's coming out in paperback. Is that something we can expect?
I have not gotten it to the paperback stage yet because I'm a procrastinator, number one. But it's kind of an involved process where if I go through Amazon, I've heard, issues with the quality of the paperback. So I'm trying to find a better quality, print on demand. And that's, a little more time consuming and it costs money. Whereas I can digitally upload things to Amazon for free. I do my own formatting and just upload it. And, there you have it. I would like to move into the paperback stage with that book and the others that I'm doing. And there's a second book on Kindle called T for Three. It's a book of short stories, just mystery stories of different genres. Okay,
that's one I don't have, but that's because I'm waiting for other things. I'll get to that. I swear to God, people will get to that. But can you tell us a little bit about the one involving short stories? Short stories of what kind of nature?
So it's really kind of a weird or eclectic, perhaps would be the best word to say, mix. Like the first story is a very paranormal sort of mystery story.
Ooh.
Then the second story is sort of deals with the second story takes place in the 60s after the Vietnam War with a private eye who's been tasked with finding basically the fountain of youth in a bottle. And that's kind of an interesting story that I'd had kicking around for a while called Blood Like Wine, I think is the title of that one.
Okay.
And then the third story was, you're going to love this. We bounced back to Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know if you're familiar with he'd written a short story called The Cask of Amontillado.
Yes. I had to read that in high school.
We all did, right? And but Poe, I have a book. Poe, a very good writer, an amazing writer, and he could do a lot in a very short amount of words. And if you ever go back to reread Cask of Amontillado, you'll be surprised at how short it is. It's really like 2 or 3 pages. It's amazingly short for the amount of menace and horror he generates, and that's why he was the master at that. But I did a story off of that story. Basically, I started thinking, well, what if I was the guy behind the brick wall? Could I escape? Would there be a way to escape? It's like he just built this. And this always kind of bugs me whenever, and this is a thing I think writers do, or anybody, critics, okay, if I'm behind a wall and I've, because I've built block walls and brick walls and stuff with my dad. So if that cement is wet, right, he could get through it, and so I always had this idea of, well, what would happen if he were able to escape? And then it would be, and that's why the title of that story is Fortunato's Revenge, because Fortunato was the guy behind the brick wall.
Very cool. Very cool. I can't say all, like a fraction of cops who retire or have writing interests, etc. And you're not obviously the only cop author that's down in the San Diego area. I spoke to Joe Wamba.
My favorite.
About a year and a half ago. And it's one of those things where I interviewed him in January 2019, before you.
Wow.
And when I spoke to him, I take it back, after you, January 2020. And it's one of those things where I line up, just like you, up a bunch of questions. And sometimes I have 3 or 4 pages of questions, single-spaced. In your case tonight, I have about 2 pages of questions. In his case, I had about 10 pages of questions, single-spaced. Sure. But Joe was very precise, and he was very specific, and he said, I don't want to be on any more than 30 minutes. So it got to 30 minutes, and I reminded him. He asked me to remind him, and I reminded him at 30 minutes, and he said, let's go. Come on. What do you got? What do you got? And I got through a fraction of the questions that I had for him. Extremely gracious gentleman. After almost an hour, then we wrapped up. And it's one of those things where because I'm actually going somewhere with this, George. I'm sure you're thinking right now, God, this goofy son of a bitch, where is he going? Well, where I'm going is, how do you talk? How do you craft words trying to convey respect to a gentleman that you loved and admired his work, his craft, since the early 70s? That's when I became a cop. I cut my teeth on Joe Wamba novels and all the cops around me. We loved everybody back then. No one will know what it is. Everybody that back then we called, suspects scrotes. It comes from the George Wamba or the Joseph Wamba novels.
Right.
And so how do you talk to someone that you have admired for so long and had such a great deal to do? Someone that if only you could have lunch with this guy.
Right.
And not have to worry about any kind of verbiage. To pick this guy's brain for a fraction of an amount of time, it's like, God, what questions do I ask? How do I possibly show or illustrate to him how important he was in my life at such a young age? I bought every book he ever wrote.
Oh yeah, same.
I admired him. And so how do you talk to one of the people that you so admired for so long, because he so influenced me in terms of the voice of copdom? He became it. There were writers beforehand and, of course, many others afterwards. But he was a huge influence on cops in the 70s and the 80s and up through the 90s. And even in the 2000s, he was still writing his Hollywood station books. And then, of course, movies, TV shows. This guy was yes, exactly. He was a major influence on how media saw cops. And the one thing that I started reading a whole bunch of interviews, and the one thing he said was, my books aren't about what cops do to the job. My books are about what the job does to the cop.
Oh, that's insightful.
So, having said that, now, George Eliseo, who would be the writers, cop or otherwise, obviously besides Edgar Allan Poe, who really influenced you and informed you about your writing, your style? Who did you admire? I almost worship.
I was a big fan of Wamba, and the others that, if you've ever read Dick Francis, he was a British author. He wrote a lot of thrillers, and a lot of his thrillers had to do with horse racing.
Okay.
But it was interesting because he was a former jockey, but what was interesting is they were like mystery thrillers that revolved around the racetrack, like whether it was betting or horses being doped. He found a way to make it just really interesting. He was a great thriller writer. If you ever get a chance, I highly recommend him. Robert B. Parker, who wrote the Spencer for Hire novel.
Right.
Big. A lot of my first person, like Altering Course and some of my other first person stuff, is very. I lean heavily. I was really influenced by him. I really like that style, the Spencer for Hire novels. Another British author named Len Deighton, who wrote Berlin Game and Mexico Set and London Match and a bunch of other. He was a spy writer and a spy suspense writer, similar to John Le Carre. I always mispronounce his name.
Okay.
And those guys, another big influence. Stephen King, I read a lot of. I think I read everything Stephen King ever wrote up to It. And then after It, then I'd had it with him.
You'd had it.
I'd had it with him, yeah. Some of his stuff it just got a bit much, He comes up with a great premise, in my humble opinion. He's obviously a mega millionaire writer, but some of his stuff, just to me, it seemed like he comes up with a great premise, and then this is the thing, like The Stand, this is it, the end of the world, but then the ending. If you have too big of a beginning, how does your ending match? You can't, if you're so huge at the beginning and this is like the apocalypse, how do you have an ending that beats that justifies that? And a lot of times his books don't, So that was kind of it for me. But yeah, off the top of my head, those are a lot of the big influences.
Okay. How many times, and this is what I find exceedingly frustrating about reading books, and I bet everybody out there right now has been in this position numerous times. This dates me. You'll go to a bookstore. Yeah, that was it right there. That dated me right there.
Yeah, that was the dating. Yeah.
So you go to a bookstore, or you go to a website, or maybe you go to Amazon, wherever it is that you go, and you look at, again, this dates me, the back cover, or you look at the inside cover, and you think, holy crap, that premise sounds great. Or you read a blurb on Amazon, because they always send you just a never-ending series of emails. Right. And then you decide, do I? Yeah, I'm going to do it. You read the book, you open it, because not all their books let you see the inside of the book.
Right.
And then how many times have you gotten a book, looked at the premise, and finally figured out within page, 1 to 10, that the author is one of the clumsiest writers in the world, and this is garbage you wouldn't feed to your dog.
Oh, yeah. No, I know that feeling. Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons, you bring up a good point, an interesting point to me that resonates with me is that I have stopped reading fiction. I haven't read fiction since the 1990s.
Really?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I have read, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I tell you I've read probably over 10,000 books in my life. I was an early reader. That's all I did was read. I read, go to the library. I buy books. I'd, borrow books. when I worked on the ambulance. I worked on an ambulance for several years in a little town called Escondido here in San Diego County, and they had one of those bookstores. Talking about bookstores, but it's one of those used paperback stores, and so I would go and I'd buy 5 paperbacks, and then I would read them, and then while I'm working, because there was a lot of downtime when you're an ambulance attendant, and then I would take those 5 back and get 5 more, and so I've read all the fiction I'm going to read, and because for the exact reason you mentioned, and what has happened, what happened with books and with movies was that, like you say, you see something like, this is a great premise, this is a great idea, and then it just, goes to shit, it goes downhill, it doesn't go, or there's, these huge plot holes in it, like there's, that's not logical. That guy wouldn't do that in that situation, it's like, so I started seeing all this, and then I sort of just came to the realization that I could write better things than what I was reading and or seeing on TV or at the movies.
Bingo. I talked to Matt Betley, who's an author, and he said he started writing because he figured out, I can write crap better than this.
Exactly.
Now,
but here, you know what?
Seriously, is that one of your major motivations? Were you actually thinking, this is garbage, I can do better?
Yeah, exactly. It was one of the it was a driving force, really, because I was like, God, like there's so many things where I look at something and I see, to me, it seems obvious. The story should have, in my opinion, the story should have gone this way, but the author went some other way, or the movie went some other different way, and it's like, why? It doesn't make any sense, and I just, it bugs me. So then, and I like to write stories even before that. I mean, I just love writing, just making up stories and writing them down. I used to do my younger brother's homework. He had he was a few years behind me in high school, and so he'd come to me and says, "Hey, I got an English assignment. We're supposed to write this story. You want to write it?" I go, "Yeah, sure, give it to me." So I would write the story, just make something up, and I'd write the story for him. And then he ended up telling me years later, he's like, "Yeah, my English teacher, he'd be like, man, sometimes you bring me these great stories, and other times they're just terrible."
Yeah.
He couldn't figure out why the big disparity in stories,
So, okay, folks, I'm talking to George Eliseo. He's a retired San Diego PD officer, retired in the year 2000. And as you write, I already know the answer. Like a good attorney, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. But some other people may not. When you write, as it's flowing, do you sometimes just all of a sudden there's a camshaft thrown and it's like, oh, that's it, I'm done. What next? Writer's block. I guess they could call it writer's block.
Yeah, fortunately, I don't suffer from that. I have sort of the opposite problem, where I have too many ideas and too many stories. So I find myself, my problem is sticking with one story and finishing it completely, because what happens with me is I get an idea for another story while I'm writing, the last story, or if I've in between writing that story, I've seen a really shitty movie on Netflix or something, and that has now inspired me, which is the reason I'm writing this. I'm writing my first romantic comedy story that I've never written a romantic comedy before. So I was inspired because I saw this shitty Netflix movie. So yeah, it was just, So so now I've been writing that, and I have neglected my other story that we'll talk about. But while I've got you, I want to read you this. Talking about reading fiction, I ran across this quote just recently, and I'm surprised. I mean, it's taken me this long to find this particular quote, but I want to read this to you. It's from Albert Einstein. And he says, reading after a certain age diverts the mind too much from its creative pursuits. Any man who reads too much and uses his own brain too little falls into lazy habits of thinking, just as the man who spends too much time in the theater is tempted to be content with living vicariously instead of living his own life. So.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought of is 2 points. Number one, you don't read fiction because you're kind of disappointed in it, but your point, his point, could also be it distracts you too much. Is that part of what you're saying?
Yes, and that's and there was two. There's like two reasons. The main reasons for me not to read fiction is one is that I don't want to be a consumer. I want to be a creator. And I think I've read. You can only. It's the hero's journey. It's a 3-act structure. There's not that many variations on it. We all do our part, but I've read so many books and